from our State House studio in Montgomery. I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. We are less than 3 weeks away from the start of the 2024 regular session of the Alabama legislature. That will begin on Tuesday, February 6th, when Governor Kay Ivey will give her State of the State address. And just as a reminder, we will air her address to the legislature live right here on Alabama Public Television, with our coverage beginning at 5 o'clock that evening. On to the news. Alabama's latest unemployment report is out. The state's jobless rate was up slightly for the month of December at 2.6%, but the year-over-year numbers show remarkable stability in that the previous December also had a low unemployment rate of 2.6%. Of course, the number that the governor and state lawmakers are concerned about is the workforce participation rate, which stands at 57.2%. That's up slightly from the previous month, and over the last year, that rate has improved 0.5% to 56.7%. It was a big week in West Alabama. A proposed healthcare sciences high school in Demopolis got a big boost as Bloomberg Philanthropies pledged to contribute $26.4 million to make the school a reality. That money is contingent on state funding also coming through. The proposal is for the high school to produce healthcare science graduates ready for medical school, nursing school, or to go right into the healthcare workforce. Governor Kay Ivey originally proposed the idea last year, but the legislature did not include it in the final budget. Locals are hoping that this private commitment will change that this year.
This is an exciting day in West Alabama. Oh, what a good day to be alive. I am so excited to see all these faces in support of what we're doing here. I too want to thank Governor Ivey for her vision. And when we heard that vision of Governor Ivey then pinpointed not only a vision for a school in the state of Alabama, but in her address, she pinpointed that she wanted it to be in West Alabama. And that was important. We saw the cyber school in Huntsville go up. Then Bill Poole, who was then state representative, who was over the budget, he and I and AJ got together in a room and we watched that process. And after Governor Ivey said that she wanted in West Alabama, we went and we looked at the process and how the process was going to work. So that's why we introduced the bill to bring it to West Alabama, and particularly here in Demopolis. There's no other place in West Alabama that could have taken this but Demopolis. And we want to say thank you to this Demopolis community.
It all started with the vision from Governor Ivey. So Governor Ivey, a couple of years ago, her vision was to improve workforce development in the state of Alabama and incorporate high school education in it. At the same time, the state of Alabama, as well as all the states in the United States, suffer and have a huge challenge in healthcare jobs around the nation, and the state of Alabama is one of them. So when we were approached at UAB by Governor Ivey and asked for help, we started the work immediately. And the first thing we did, we actually put together a very large number of thought leaders around the states in government, education, healthcare, finance, work development. And we sat all together and we wanted to figure out a solution. How can we do this? How can we respond to Governor Ivey's vision and request? And that's really how the Alabama School of Healthcare Sciences was born.
Last week, Randy Scott talked with Anthony Brock of Valiant Cross Academy about some exciting news on the horizon. This week, we learned the details. The all-boys Christian school in Montgomery was awarded the YAS Prize, known as the Pulitzer of Education Innovation, and it comes with a big reward. Randy Scott was on hand for the story.
Good news for Montgomery's Valiant Cross Academy. Their efforts to educate future leaders in the capital city are paying off, literally.
A tremendous day. It's the answer to a lot of prayers. Just to have more people to know about Valiant Cross across the nation means a lot to us, and this is one of the first steps in that. So we're very appreciative to the Yas family, to the Montgomery community for always being supportive.
Co-founder and head of school Anthony Brock says when Valiant Cross opened in 2015, the idea was to help young African-American boys get a better education. Today, with over 200 students of different races, their story is making a difference. The staff entered the Yas Foundation's Education Challenge to celebrate successful schools.
Probably the only all-boys school in the competition this year that I know of that made it to at least the semifinals and quarterfinals, so just honored.
The Yas Prize for Sustainable Transformational Outstanding Permissionless Education is a nationwide effort to find, reward, and celebrate great education providers.
Jeannie Allen serves as the director of the Yas Prize.
Valiant Cross was the winner of the $1 million Yas Prize, and today they are here to be celebrated.
So we're here to hope that the rest of the country takes note of this, what Alabama's doing, what states like Arizona and Florida have done for poor children, to have the existing money follow the children to the school of their choice.
Janine Yas is the founder of the Yas Prize. She says Valiant Cross checked all the boxes with their efforts to improve learning for their young scholars.
They know where they could be otherwise if they didn't have schools like this. They know the other options out there. So many of the public school districts have failed children, and coming from those seats, they appreciate it more than we could ever know.
We're here at Valiant Cross Academy in downtown Montgomery, where a short time ago, a bit of history was made. This school has been awarded a huge grant for the hard work it does to help educate some young people in this city. And that work is the start of a new era for Valiant Cross. That new time starts immediately with a special announcement.
I'm proud today to announce that in the fall of 2024, Valiant Cross Academy will be opening up an elementary school here in Montgomery, Alabama.
Stepping ahead into the future. For Capital Journal, I'm Randy Scott.
After the event, Governor Ivey was asked for an update on her development of school choice legislation. You may remember that the governor last year broke the news on this program that she would be proposing school choice legislation and specifically authorizing education savings accounts. Ivey said her advisors are still working on that proposal and that it would likely be ready by early session.
Education savings accounts are designed to give parents extra choices so they can choose the best school in their view for their students to attend. So I'm all for it, and the more we can get, the better it'll be. We're working hard on the bill.
Turning to Washington for a moment to check in on Alabama's congressional delegation. Congress this week passed legislation extending federal funding through March and averting a government shutdown. The House and Senate have been unable for a year to pass regular order appropriations bills, forcing them to rely on short-term continuing resolutions that simply keep funding at current levels. The Alabama delegation was split on the vote, and here's how that breaks down. Voting in favor were Representatives Robert Adderholt of the 4th District, Mike Rogers of the 3rd District, Terry Sewell of the 7th District, and Dale Strong of the 5th District. Voting against the measure were both Senators Tommy Tuberville and Katie Britt, and Representatives Jerry Carl of the 1st District, Barry Moore of the 2nd District, and Gary Palmer of the 5th District. When we come back for our interview portion of Capital Journal, we'll be talking politics. I'll first be joined by Alexander Hefner, host of The Open Mind here on PBS, about civility in politics as we enter this campaign season, as well as his updated book. Later, I'll be joined by 3 more congressional candidates as we make our way through this long list of 2nd District candidates, Democrat Phyllis Harvey Hall and Republicans Greg Albritton and Hampton Harris. We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts. Keep up with what's happening with Capital Journal.
With the Iowa caucuses complete and the New Hampshire primary just around the corner, we are certainly in the political season, so to speak. And joining me next to talk about that is Alexander Hefner, host of The Open Mind on PBS and author of A Documentary History of the United States. Alexander, thanks for coming on the show.
A pleasure being with you, Todd. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, I wanted to get your take on just this political environment. You know, you report and travel the country, talking to voters, talking to candidates, breaking bread with candidates. So you might have a great perspective on just what the vibe is out there in this political season. It seems so divisive and divided, but what does it look like on the ground?
Well, on the ground, there's a hunger for solutions, consensus, constructive dialogue, and discourse that's going to elicit sound public policy. That's the American creed. We wouldn't be in the jobs we're in, and folks wouldn't be attending town hall meetings, writing letters to the editor, and participating in civic life if they didn't still have some semblance of promise in that sacred life, liberty, and happiness, and politics as the vehicle to achieve it. So, of course, the mainstream conventional wisdom is that we're disillusioned, we're disenchanted, we're dejected. And there is truth to that. But for every voter who is entirely fed up with the system and basically entrenched in apathy, there's another voter who is still holding out hope that we can return to not just a more civil discourse, but a more functional government.
Mm. Well, you know, so much of cable news is just kind of arguing back and forth. It's almost just like this form of entertainment that people watch over and over again. It's sort of adding to that, you know, furor and that anger that exists out there. Is that an outsized? Does that, you know, that is sort of an exaggeration of what really exists? Because it seems to me, you know, your programs, especially, you know, The Open Mind, is dedicated to kind of bringing down that volume and just having a real conversation. It's a really great space for that, one that's really needed.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, Todd, and your forum as well. I think the perspective and the skewed perspective that the media often portray is that there is most predominant in our politics a viciousness and hatefulness, and that is embodied in the electorate, not just in our representatives and their statements to each other or their statements antagonizing the opposite party. And so when you have that projected on social media, you've had for so many years now this toxic fusion of traditional clickbait, you know, what we see on television, the echo chamber of cable news, now merged with the feeding frenzy of social media. And that is such a destructive equation that really results in believing that one half of America despises the other half of America. And having traveled to all 50 states, I can tell you that's just plainly not true. Mm-hmm. Now, we do have aspirations and resentments as Americans. There's no doubt about it. And the last presidency and the last 25 years of public policy sometimes informs what our aspirations are and what our resentments are as Americans. In my mind, it's always about reconciling those two things and being a positive force in the discourse. And then if you want to see a policy outcome, explain to people why it's good for you and your neighbors and hear people out in those conversations. If we get to the crux of it is the human experience. It's the storytelling. It's how people found their way to a certain conviction. It's not the conviction itself about being for or against something. It's that body of human experience, people's family lives, their school lives, their professional lives, and how that equates to coming to a point of view. I recently, as you know, spoke at the University of Alabama, and the point that I tried to make to students was that, at the end of the day, we're starting from the wrong place. We all seemingly want clean water and clean air, and understand that, there are nonpartisan, impartial folks who look at the dials of chemicals or poison in stream water or in tap, and assess that. That's not a partisan declaration. That's not a left or right or conservative or liberal assessment. And so if we can agree at the most basic level that politics in a functional sense is about having engineers and the departments of environmental conservation that basically ensure our water is clean and our air is clean, like, why don't we just start there?
Well, I know you've been in Alabama partly to promote your book, A Documentary History of the United States. Talk about how this book came about and what readers can expect when they pick it up.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, Todd. They can expect a chronological history, much like if you go to one of the museums in Alabama, had the opportunity to see the Institute in Birmingham, and it is immersive. And you start with the era predating civil rights, and you go through antebellum, through the contemporary condition of human rights, not just in America, but the world. And that was illuminating. And my book aspires to illuminate the story of America from Tom Paine's Common Sense and Frederick Douglass's speech on July 4th, What It Means to Be an American, all the way zooming to President Trump and President Biden, and finding the most pivotal documents that have formatively shaped our identity, from the perspective of our military, from the perspective of our media, from the perspective of the broader culture. So the book was launched by my grandfather in the 50s, and the idea was to provide an anthology that didn't exist at the time. If you wanted to access rudimentary U.S. history, there weren't many textbooks. You'd probably have to go to your local library and read Encyclopedia Britannica. Now, of course, we have Wikipedia. But what's been lost through such seamless access to anything you want is the importance of primary sources and primary documents as the first draft of history, and really speaking precisely to the climate, the tenor. What were these people thinking when they were authoring a document to declare our independence? So from the framers to the contemporary presidents, my grandfather wanted to provide a resource in classrooms that did not exist. And it was, in effect, a compendium and anthology like Britannica, but condensed with the most essential documents charting our history.
Well, Alexander, thanks for your time today, and safe travels.
Thank you, sir.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page.
Montgomery native Catherine C. Thornton is a physicist and former NASA astronaut. A veteran of 4 space flights, Thornton has logged over 975 hours in space, including more than 21 hours of extravehicular activity. During her time with NASA, she served on the crew of STS-49, the maiden flight of Space Shuttle Endeavour, helped repair the Hubble Space Telescope, and conducted microgravity experiments in Spacelab.
Joining me next is State Senator Greg Albritton, who is also a candidate for Congress in the newly redrawn Alabama 2nd Congressional District. Senator, thanks for coming on Capitol Journal.
Thanks for having me, Todd. Good to be here.
We're used to having budget conversations and things about, previewing the session maybe, and we'll get to that. but you're a candidate for Congress. You've put your name in the hat for this new district, newly redrawn, kind of a short window there.
A little bit.
So let me ask you the question I ask all the candidates, and that is, why are you running for Congress?
Because the country's in trouble. We have, and I'll get to more detail about that, but not only do we have the border problems, which ranges from a fiasco to a travesty, and we have the international issues that we've got, but our biggest problem is, frankly, economic. The federal government is fast approaching a problem that we can't keep up with. They're spending, and we're spending printed money. Okay, that's all we're doing, and it's making significant problems for us. It's different. Let me make some comparisons, if I might, between how we are in Alabama and the feds. Over the time frame, and we've talked about this on this show before, is how well Alabama has handled its finances. But the credit rating of Alabama has been increasing. It's been improving. The credit rating of the federal government has declined. We wound up with surplus on June 30. The federal government wound up with $1.7 trillion in debt. We paid several of our debts off this past year. February, we paid the ATF off, and about 6 or 7, I think it was, other bonds that were due. We paid those off also, whereas the federal government is now 33, 34, approaching and moving toward $35 trillion in debt. We have in our general fund interest on savings that's coming in. That's the main part of our income for general fund. On the federal government, we're paying out almost now $1 trillion just in interest payments. Completely different avenues of approach.
So it sounds like you're saying that the federal government could learn some lessons from what Alabama has been able to do.
They've got to. We've got to take these lessons that we've learned and have applied in Alabama. We've got to take those and apply them in Washington. If we don't, I'm afraid the federal government's on a financial death spiral here. We can't keep doing what we're doing.
That seems like a really tough task. I mean, how do you get started with such a monumental task? Is it just going to have to be a step-by-step approach? I mean, $3 trillion in debt?
No, sir. 34 trillion,
oh, gosh.
And moving toward 35. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we
You're
talked about it
about
as
last month's numbers. Okay,
wow.
Todd?
I mean, come on. Yeah.
No, you're right. We have to stop doing what we're doing. We can do this. Now, we faced the similar problems when we came into power, the Republicans did in 2010. And we made changes. We made policy changes. We made procedural changes. We made determined legislative changes in the process. And we stuck to those. And now we find ourselves in a completely different ball game. No proration. We have surpluses. We're doing tax cuts. We're doing those things that a government ought to do. We need to take those same things to Washington. Now, I know 1 out of 435, and it seems like it is an impossible task to do. But until someone gets there and makes an effort to try and starts talking about it, we're not going to make any improvement. We can't keep it up. We got to have answers.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I've had a lot of conversations with candidates, and nobody's been that specific on the fiscal stuff. And you frankly used to hear a lot more Republicans talk about that than these days.
And that's the problem, Todd, is we've stopped talking about it. We just ignore it and go on. Like right now, they're up there. They're trying to find a way to pass another CR. That is the poor way of doing it. That's the way of just, you're ignoring the problem and you're doing it, frankly, in my mind, illegally. But we can't shut things down. We've got to keep the process going, but we've got to sit down and work this through. We've done that here. I want to do it up there. I think we can.
So what other issues are coming up on the campaign trail, issues that you are appealing to voters about specifically?
Well, obviously, we're talking about the border problems. Okay, the border issues, and the main answer to that, frankly, is that we have to enforce the law. We didn't have this problem. We didn't change the laws. We simply changed the procedures and actions, and the administrations did, not just the current one, but others have. This has been ongoing for 20 years. We've got to enforce the existing law and take a determined action to make that happen. That's taking a change in policy. It's going to take a change in resources. We've got to do it. The other, international. We're in trouble internationally. We have a war going on in Ukraine. We have a war in the Middle East, and who knows what's going to blow up in the Far East. We've got to get our military back in play. I'm the only veteran of military service in this whole gaggle of us that's running for this District 2. I know how to run military. I've served officer, I've served enlisted, I've been in reserve, I've done active duty time. I know what it's like to serve overseas and to be deployed. That's where we got to pay attention to make sure that we're safe, to make sure that we can respond, whereas right now we're not responding at all. Mm-hmm. We've got to take a firm hand on where we are militarily, financially, and security-wise on the border. Those are the issues that I think are focusing on.
Have you given any thought to what committees you would want to
Sure.
sit on if you got elected?
Sure. One of the things that District 2 is far short of is infrastructure. Roads, bridges, internet, and I can keep naming each all the way through. So my purpose would be, and I've already been to Washington and told them this is where my preference is to get on the transportation and infrastructure. That would be the means where we can give the directions and such that we can move forward on. That would give us the means so that we can get these half-built roadways completed that's down there. Do you know you can't travel through District 2 on a single roadway? It takes 3 or 4. You can't even travel through the district and remain in the district. Sometimes you can't and remain in the state. It's a very cut up piece of land that has been ignored for so long. Out of the 13 counties in this district, one of them had a population increase in the last census. One of them held its own, remained static. The other 11 had declines, significant declines in population. We've got to stop that drain. And the way you do that is by improving the infrastructure that's in that area.
Well, speaking of this new district, it's changed a lot, not just geographically, but demographically.
Correct.
To where it's, AL2 was reliably red for a long time, reliably Republican. Now it's really more purple. You could even argue there might be a Democratic advantage. So the reason I bring that up is any Republican that wins the nomination is probably going to have to appeal to those more independent,
Correct.
more moderate voters.
That's
so
correct.
how do you do, because you got to win the Republican primary,
Yep.
appeal to the base, but then you've got to turn around and maybe appeal to those voters. So how do you do that?
My whole career has been doing that. If you look on where I've ran and in this district of the 13 counties, 5 of them I've represented. I've lived in several of them too. I know this district. I know the people there. I have represented people there. I have beat Democrats and I've beat Republicans there. I know what it takes to win in this area. I am the only one that has taken and had multiple races with multiple candidates and come out the winner. Not all the time, but for the most part I have. I know how to win this district. I know what the needs are. I know the people.
Mm-hmm. Well, before I want to switch gears to legislative in a minute, but is there a campaign website or somewhere people can go and learn more about your campaign?
Allbritain4alabama.com. Allbritain4alabama.com.
Okay, well there you go. I did want, while I have
And
you.
thank you for that.
Well, that came from a viewer. A viewer had seen some of the previous interviews and said, "Hey, why don't you ask the candidates to offer their website?" It was a good note. So thank you.
Yep, good note.
Switching to legislative, chairman of the Senate General Fund Budget Committee, for lack of the longer term. How are we doing? How is that general fund? I spoke to your counterpart in the House, and he expressed some optimism. Are y'all seeing some really good numbers, general fund wise?
Well, we're seeing pretty good numbers. First off, let me say again, we are seeing the good numbers because of the planning and because of the careful way that we're doing things. We have not spent every dime, and we have been, if I might use the word, swamped with federal money these past 2 or 3 years. Handling that, in addition to the regular budget, has not been easy. It's been a challenge on the executive and the legislative process, but we have done well with them. We've put more infrastructure in the ground than we ever have, with water and sewer lines, roadways are going in. We're doing well in Alabama that way. Budget-wise, we have continued growth. As I mentioned, the biggest growth that we have is interest that's coming into the general fund, and yet we know that much of the money that we have and have had has been federal money, and monies that we had, that's being spent. That's being drained out and put into the ground. Then we're going to have these interest rates beginning to decline. We're told those are coming along. So that's going to put a dent in our growth and the significant growth that we've had. I know that in the ETF we've had showings, in particular in income tax, that has shown a slight decline. So we're unsure about where we are headed with the future, but we're going to be prepared for it.
Look forward to that. It always starts with the budgets, and y'all got general fund upstairs this year, right?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Starting there.
Right. Right. Turning to an issue that we get asked about a lot, that's gambling. We hear about conversations going on, especially in the House, with
as well it should be. Okay,
well,
you've heard me on that.
Absolutely. I mean, that's where it has typically gone to die, and so that makes sense that they'd start there. Plus, the speaker has kind of given them some instructions and things.
Yes.
What are the latest conversations? We know we're talking about lottery, casino, sports book, kind of like your previous bills. Where are we, and how much momentum would you say exists at this moment?
I think we have more momentum than we've had previously. And there's been a lot of serious work in the House. My compliments to the House members, Andy Witt, Chris Blacksher, the Speaker, that have taken this on and have educated themselves and others of this issue. They have personally gone out and seen what's out there. And they have taken what we've done before and have built around, I think, a very good core from what I've seen, potential bill that looks like it's feasible. It is comprehensive. It deals with everything that we've talked about: lotteries, the capping, the controlling, the regulating, the taxing. All of that's in place, and enforcement is beefed up strongly. I think they've taken this and ran through all the gamuts that they can. I'm optimistic that this is the best piece of legislation in gambling that was ever been brought. It'll bring clarity to the state. It'll bring regulation to the state. It'll stop this growth of cancer that we have called gaming, just growing wildly. I think it's going to be a good piece.
I think you're also going to see this year some groups that are opposed to expansion of gambling. Alabama Policy Institute being one of them is coming out really strongly.
Yep.
Probably going to have some others too, maybe more so in the past, that have been aggressively pushing back on that, on the idea of any bill.
Maybe that's an indication how close we are.
Well, my question is, do you think that's going to have an effect? Because you've got a lot of new lawmakers who have never voted on this issue before.
Sure, that's true. Sure it will. But it is what it is. You fight the battles that you're given, not the ones you want or plan for. You're correct. There'll be opposition here, just as strong, just as in a different tack than we've been accustomed to. We'll see what we get when we get it to the floor. The Speaker has said publicly that he intends to bring this to a floor vote on the House.
That's one of many, many issues to watch. We're out of time, but thank you again for coming on here, and good luck on the campaign trail.
Thank you. Good to see you. Appreciate it.
We'll be right back.
At 2 p.m. on February 16, 1968, the very first 911 call was made in Haleyville, Alabama. The call was made by State Representative Rankin Veit from Haleyville Mayor James Witt's office and was answered by U.S. Representative Tom Bevel at the Haleyville Police Station on a bright red telephone that was given to the city by the Alabama Telephone Company. Haleyville still celebrates their part in 911 history with an annual festival.
You're watching Alabama Public Television.
Joining me next is Phyllis Harvey Hall, Democratic candidate for Congress in Alabama's 2nd District. Ms. Hall, thanks for coming on Capitol Journal.
And thank you so much, Todd, for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. We've been trying to get to all the candidates for this brand new district. You know, brand new district spans so much of the state, so I thought it was important to really to talk to as many as we can. So again, really appreciate you coming on. So let me ask you what I've been asking all of the candidates, and that is, why are you running for Congress?
And thank you for asking that question. And I'll begin with just a brief history of this, that I am running for the same reason in which I ran in 2020 and in 2022. Because as I have lived in this district, born in this district and lived, people need someone who is not just going up under the title of an elected official. Mm-hmm. They need someone who's going to represent this district. And when I first got in the race in 2020, it was because I knew we needed representation. We needed someone who would present causes to the highest form of government, our federal government, who would take the people's causes and present them, the issues that were lying within our district. And at that time, I didn't see the person who was running for that seat that was going to go and do that work. Because if we're not careful, we can be caught up on our own ideological path and forget about the people that we are supposed to represent. And I follow this quote as I've come of this particular age in life, that you must be the change that you want to see in the world. And in District 2, there are a lot of concerns that we need to have resolved. And I'm about fixing those problems and representing the people, presenting the causes and the problems to every branch of government, particularly the federal branch, and resolving issues that will make an impact on people's lives.
You mentioned running before in the 2nd District. Of course, the district has dramatically changed, but what lessons did you take away from those campaigns that you think can help you in this brand new district, in this campaign?
Well, if you look at that, and a lot of people possibly have looked at those races, even of the district, we are looking at now having what we consider to be a competitive district. It is slightly leaning, I think, more one way towards leaning, as we would say, Democratic, but it's still a very competitive district. It's not a 50-50. But what I take away from that was that when I ran in 2020 and in 2022, those races, when we had, they were like 27% minority. In each of those races, I was able to win and come over and win with a percent higher than 27% minority. So it's never been about so much the minority or the majority for me, but it's been about people. So I take that to mean that it's issues that people are concerned about. Now here in Alabama, we have our problems with the R and the D, and we get caught up with national issues that really are quite distant from us, but politicians use those to get elected. And I take away several things. People want someone who is going to represent them. People are concerned about their daily lives. They're concerned about education. They're concerned about workforce development. They're concerned about redevelopment in rural areas.
I keep hearing that from a lot of candidates, Republican and Democrat, about the rural nature of the district and how that needs to be a focus. Well, you mentioned issues. What issues in particular that Congress can affect are you bringing up on the campaign trail to appeal to voters?
I like the way you face that. And as we're out in the communities and in forums, you're right, there are certain issues that I brought up that are not. We know that education is a function of the state, so I'll leave that. But the bigger issue for me, when you start looking at education and workforce development, you cannot just discuss one of those because they are intricately tied together. And so when I start thinking about workforce development and we're looking at our economic development, well, on the federal level, we need to raise the minimum wage. We have looked at this, my team and I, in $7.25, and neither one of us can even fathom trying to live off of that. And we're offering that as a minimum wage. And there are a lot of companies in Alabama that do pay that. And now we're seeing the change that some companies are choosing to offer more. But raising the federal minimum wage, that's an issue. Codifying voting rights, the John Lewis voting rights, that's a federal issue. And then one of the other things that we're not talking about, but looking at justice and criminal justice, and looking at reforming our criminal justice system.
Now you're from Montgomery, right?
I might as well say I'm a dual citizen,
Okay.
Mr. Stacy. I've been in Montgomery. I graduated from Alabama State University. I'm a Hornet. That's my first graduation. So yes, I have later went to AUM, TSUM, so varied college degrees here. But before that, I was born in Connecticut County, which is straight down I-65.
Well, there you go. So the reason I brought it up is, you know, the geographic nature of this district. It used to just kind of be the corner of the state.
Yes.
Now it's a whole swath.
You're right.
But you know, talk about the challenge of, okay, you're from Montgomery or live here now.
This is
probably very much home turf for you. But then you got to go down to Mobile. You got to go to Phoenix City. How has it been trying to connect with voters in so many different places in such a large district?
Now, this is one of the pluses for me having run 7 of the counties that we're running in. Pike County included, Crenshaw, you're talking about Butler, you're talking about Bullock, you're talking about Conecuh, you're talking about Montgomery. Those are counties in which I've already developed relationships with people, and that is helpful. Barber County, which I left out, so that's those are counties that already have infrastructure in. And as running as a Democrat, the Democratic infrastructure, as you well know, in Alabama has been a little bit derailed, shall we say, for different reasons. But so I have some name recognition and ID in 7 of the counties. And in the other counties, when you're talking about Mobile, I'm from Evergreen, Alabama. You know, that's just another. We went to Mobile for entertainment, doctors, hospitals. We didn't have that. And that's another huge issue we're talking about. Monroeville, which is Monroe County. As a person growing up and in my teens, we had to travel through those counties and go into those counties and visit. So they're not that foreign to me. Russell, when you start talking about Russell County, it's a little different, but I have roots and people in Columbus, and you know, that's just a quick hop, but it's a lot to navigate. So, but we are doing it because as a candidate, I think that the only way you can actually expect people to believe in you is that you do the grassroots work of meeting them.
Oh, that's absolutely true. You got to put in the effort. One thing I've been asking all candidates too on both sides, you mentioned it being kind of a purple district, right? It's probably lean Democrat, but it's a pretty competitive district. And the reason I think that's important is, you know, it's no longer just automatic Republican or automatic, you know, Democrat.
Right.
So, you know, if you're nominated as the Democrat, you might have to appeal to those independent, more moderate voters, even some Republicans. Are you the kind of candidate that can do that, can appeal to those independents?
I love that question because some of my best friends are Republicans, so go figure. And then some of the others are independents. I don't have just this one monolith group of people that I talk with. So my neighbor next door told me one day, he's like, Phyllis, I couldn't vote for you. I said, well, you couldn't, Mr. J, because you're Republican. And we laugh about that. So we have those conversations. And I think, like I was telling you, when we are also talking about health care, when you're talking about future generations, that crosses every line that we're speaking. We just have to stop the talking point noise and focus on real issues, kitchen table issues. And that's what I'm focused on. And I think that message, as I was telling you earlier, when you start looking at that, even though 2nd District was highly, highly Republican based, it was just, you looked in on your index, and it was just Republican.
It's foregone conclusion, yeah.
Yes, and that was one of the problems with me running, but I was willing to take up that challenge because you can't just leave people without a choice.
Absolutely.
And that's the reason I ran. So I don't think I have any problem with that at all.
Well, we're almost out of time, but I wanted to ask to share your website with voters so they can go and look you up and learn more about your campaign.
My website is Phyllis, which is my first name. And by the way, that came from my Republican neighbor. He's like, we know you as Phyllis. The Harvey Hall is just, he's like, it's a mouthful. But phyllisforcongress.com, and that's PHYLLIS for FOR, Congress.com. And you can find out a lot more about me on that website. And you can look at who I am. You can find that I'm more than capable of being the representative for this district, because we like to look at some of those elected officials, and as you possibly know, and it's been brought up, many of them are not from the district, but I am a product of this district, and I understand it from the rural areas into the urban areas.
Well, look, good luck on the campaign trail. We're going to be following closely. And thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts.
Continuing our effort to interview all the candidates from the newly redrawn Alabama 2nd Congressional District, next I'm pleased to be joined by Hampton Harris, Republican candidate for Congress. Hampton, thanks for coming on Capital Journal.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we're trying to get to all the candidates. Big long list there, but you're running on the Republican side. So
Correct.
let me ask you there what I ask everybody, and that is pretty simple. Why are you running for Congress?
For sure. So I've always loved this country and politics in general, and my grandfather on both sides, both my grandfathers, fought in or were part of the military, and I've seen how they've struggled with veterans affairs and all that, getting care for what they needed. And my wife is also active duty Air Force, and so I'm able to see both our past military and our current military, seeing the way that they are being treated by our government. They have terrible housing. There is terrible care. It takes forever to get in, to see the doctors if you ever get in. And our current military is more worried about pushing a political ideology on our military and using it for their politicization rather than using it to defend our country. So that is one massive reason why I wanted to get in this race, is to make sure we take care of those who took care of us and make sure we have something to defend our country. But also, as a small business owner here in the district, I've been able to see the amount of red tape and regulation and double taxation that a small business owner has, and how much it discourages people from getting in to business in the district, and how hard it is to find people that are willing to work. And all that leads back to inflation and the rising cost of everything in the district as well, caused by the leftist agenda and what they're doing up in DC. And so we need to make sure to get somebody up there that will stand up for their Christian conservative values and bring power back to the people and from the states and take it away from Washington. Because like President Trump has always said, to drain the swamp, we have to remove some power from Washington and bring it back to the people and to the states.
Well, so tell me more about your background. You talk about kind of being around here are you around Montgomery?
I grew up in Montgomery, early childhood Montgomery, moved to Pike Road back when it was just a road, before it was the big city it is now, and grew up there. I was homeschooled throughout high school along with my 6 other siblings, and so we had a big family, and that's where my mother was able to instill in us these Christian conservative values that are deeply instilled in me. And that is somewhere where I was able to learn about all of that, and moved up going to Auburn University Montgomery after I graduated, and I got an economics degree there, and then went to one of the most conservative law schools in the nation up in Birmingham, Cumberland Law School. And so I was able to get my law degree up there. And during that time, I also, in undergrad, worked for the emergency room here in Montgomery, saw the problems with our emergency room and really hospitals in general, and the opioid crisis and our healthcare system, and saw all that, the problems there. And then I also opened my own real estate brokerage and was able to do that, working my way through law school, able to afford that kind of stuff and work my way through it. So I was able to start a business here, and that's where I learned a lot of the difficulties that small business owners have made, is going through the process myself.
Now, you are the youngest candidate in the race, but what else sets you apart? Because look, in this field, you're going to have to stand out, right? You're going to have to separate yourself. So what else sets you apart as a candidate maybe you can take advantage of?
For sure. So number one, like you just said, I'm the youngest. I have a lot of passion, a lot of drive, and all the energy a young person has to get up there and make a difference. And so though I'm young, I've had a lot of success. My real estate business has sold over $12 million since it's opened. So I'm driven. I was taught to never do anything 80%. You do it 100% every time. And so I have that drive to get up there and make a change, never back off my values. But also, I'm the most conservative person in this race. And so I think that will set me apart as well, being very strong conservative, very, very grounded in my roots, and will be able to serve this district and know how to bring back, like I said, the power from Washington and give it back to the people and help this district.
Yeah, well, so you've mentioned a couple already. You mentioned Veterans Affairs issues. I'm certainly, when I used to work up in Washington, that was a big deal going on then. Lots of scandals and things like that. You talked about small businesses, things like that. What other issues are you seeking to kind of make a point about in this campaign? Issues that Congress works with, right? The issues you would be able to affect as a congressman.
For sure. So there, like I said, veterans and Second Amendment rights, very strong with me. It's a right. The government did not give us that right, but rather put limitations to keep the government from interfering with that right. And they cannot take away a right that they did not themselves give you. So standing up for our Second Amendment rights and making sure we have a strong border. We have, in August of last year, the number of illegal immigrants coming into this nation were actually greater than those being born in America. So we are having a massive influx of illegal immigrants coming to this nation. And we need to stop that and put a wall all the way up our southern border and make sure we know who is coming in this country, because there's a lot of people out there that want to hurt America. And so doing that, making sure to stand up. I mean, Roe v. Wade was overturned, but the fight's never over. And we need to make sure that the right to life, which begins at conception, is protected at all times. And so standing up for all these different just Christian conservative values up in Congress.
Any idea what committees you might want to aspire to? I mean, I know the list is long and different issues affect, are kind of touched by different committees, but do you have your sights set on anything in particular?
For sure. So Veterans Affairs for sure. And the Freedom Caucus, I would love to be a part of that as well. Congressman Barry Moore has done really well with this district, and he's been a part of it, and I would love to be a part of that as well. And so those committees I would love to be a part of.
Okay. So you talk a lot about, most conservative in the race. I guess, others might argue with you about that, but I'll take your word. But talking a lot about conservatism, Freedom Caucus, all that kind of stuff. But this district has changed a lot, and so it really is a lot more purple than it used to be. So it seems to me, I've made the argument that, whatever Republican or Democrat is nominated, they're probably going to have to appeal some to the more independent, more moderate voters just to get over the hump, get that 50%. So how would you, given your conservative bona fides, also be able to appeal to maybe those more independent, more moderate voters?
For sure. And this is a new district, and I believe that it's still a very conservative district. And I'm not going to back off my values in order to get elected. I think that's a lot of the problems that we have in Congress today are the older people we have up there that back off of values just so they can get up and get another term or get elected in the first place. And so I think that's something that's very refreshing to really all sides of the spectrum, is someone that will stand up for what they believe in and will not back down. And I still believe that this is a very conservative district that a conservative can win, and we can keep it a very Republican district.
So have you found it challenging to, just geographically, going from all the way from Phoenix City over here to Montgomery, down to Mobile, big swaths of the Black Belt? It's got to be a challenge just to get around and campaign.
It's a lot of rubber off the tires, basically living in my truck. And so I'm driving over to, like you said, Phoenix City, Russell County, Barber County, going down, hitting Washington County, Mobile. It's very, very diverse, and you get a lot of diverse. Mobile is the hub of industry and manufacturing, and they have a lot of our military production and oil. I want to bring back oil, or not bring it back, but increase oil drilling in the Gulf by American companies, not foreign companies, and bring pipelines down to help with the manufacturing. But then you come up and you go through parts of the Wiregrass region, and you have all these agriculture and row crops, and you come out to West Montgomery County, you have the Black Belt, different kinds of row crops. And so it's a very diverse district, and it's a lot to be able to get around it. And it's interesting how they decided to redistrict this district.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you probably learn a lot, don't you? Just meeting people, hearing their different stories and everything.
Oh, for sure.
That'll really help your political career in the future, I'm sure.
For sure, and I've loved meeting everybody and hearing what they feel the biggest problems of the district are, and how we can alleviate those problems and get all the people here.
Well, we're almost out of time, but I wanted to give you a chance to tell us where viewers can find your campaign. Do you have a campaign website they can go to?
For sure. HamptonHarrisForAlabama.com is my website. Hampton Harris for Congress on my Facebook and Instagram, and Hampton Harris AL on Twitter or X.
Okay, yeah, there you have it. Hampton Harris for Congress. Good luck on the campaign trail, and we will be following it closely.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
We'll be right back.
Birmingham, Alabama native Fannie Flagg, who is best known for her novel Fried Green Tomatoes, had a long career as an actress and comedian before dedicating herself to writing. Published in 1987, Fried Green Tomatoes, a story of racial and gender inequalities told through the unlikely but strong bonds of its female characters, resonated with audiences. The novel stayed on the New York Times bestseller list for 36 weeks and was adapted into a critically acclaimed movie.
That's our show for this week. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week with more Capitol Journal at the same time right here on Alabama Public Television. For our Capitol Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.